everybody, it's Dr. Cindy from the Positively Altered podcast. On today's show, we're going to dive into gluten. I know sometimes that's a scary word. And 20 years ago, I think it was synonymous for cardboard. At least it was in my world. But now, as somebody who maintains a gluten-free home and a gluten-free lifestyle, I can tell you it isn't like eating cardboard anymore. There are lots of choices, but more importantly, there's education underneath that as to why we need to know what we need to know. So make sure you get a comfy seat and a nice, good, tall glass of fresh water. We're going to be right back after we take a listen to a couple of our sponsors with my next guest.
Hello, my name is Heather Lord, and I am the COO of Professional Health Products. Cutting corners is an all too common practice in the dietary supplement industry. When my father founded Professional Health Products, he sourced the cleanest, most biologically active ingredients from around the globe. Today, that commitment remains, which is why the finest healthcare practitioners, like Dr. Cindy, have trusted us for more than 40 years. We oversee the entire process in our manufacturing facility, from sourcing and formulation to manufacturing and labeling. Today, we offer over 300 unique products that can be tailored to the nutritional and homeopathic needs of each individual. Most recently, we launched a proprietary genetic test, allowing our practitioners to get even more dialed in to their patients' health. To learn more about Professional Health Products, please talk to your practitioner or visit our website at phpltd.com.
Today, your life is going to be altered. I'm Dr. Cindy.
Welcome to Infinity. We have worked hard to create an electronic claims website that is simple and user-friendly. This is the public side. You can log into your personal web portal here. This is your dashboard. You can personalize it to your liking here. Our main focus has been to allow you to submit and edit claims as easy as possible. You will find our claims editor and claims processing is simple to use and straightforward. Our quick action bar is where you can find your most important information. Most of these icons will take you directly to the claims the number represents. You can easily view if you have any messages in your inbox of any unread alerts by looking for these blue numbers. To view the rest of our training videos to get the most of your Infinity experience, click this icon. We hope you find this web portal simple and easy to use. Thanks for letting us serve you.
I'm Dr. Cindy. Who wouldn't want to join me for the Positively Altered podcast? Thanks for sticking around to join us today. I am super excited to introduce to you my guest, Jama Lambert. Jama, welcome.
Hi, Cindy. Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, it's my pleasure. I'm going to live vicariously through you today because you are in the sunny Puerto Vallarta, and I can't say that half as pretty as you probably can. But I'm in Chicago. We got a little sunshine coming in, but not a whole lot. And I think you picked the right spot for today's podcast.
Well, yeah, see, all the lighting is coming from my window in my office. This is natural light. This is not a spotlight.
Wow, way to rub it in, my friend Jama.
Hey, and the tan, it's natural. I'm not from a tanning booth.
All right, you're killing me. So, all right, I'm going to try to get up enough energy here to feel good about jumping into an interesting topic. So I want to let you know, about 20 years ago, I've been in practice for 25 years, about 20 to 25 years ago, there was this big movement called the gluten-free movement. I just made that up. I don't know if it was really a movement. But, we started to discover many decades ago that gluten might be a problem. And when I first started to recommend to my patients that they should go to gluten-free, the response was, oh, cool, I get to eat cardboard. And yes. I think some things have come a long way. So I'm really excited to dive into that with you a little bit today because, it's a big buzzword, gluten. And I think there's a lot of great information, but I also think there's a lot of bad information. And I think we've come a long way since cardboard. So I'm really excited to get your take on it.
Well, I'm happy to help out with that. As you know, the way we met was through, I think I was at Immunosciences still, way back then, when you and I first met. And and then we transitioned, from lab to lab to lab, but always with Dr. Vojdani. And eventually we ended up with Cyrex Laboratories. And so when I was VP of Education at Cyrex, we were developing all of these advanced testing for wheat reactivity and gluten reactivity and the autoimmune disorders that they cause and the problems with the gut besides just celiac disease. We were doing these expanded tests based on other researchers' work. And so Dr. Vojdani would develop these tests based on what others had been doing in their research labs for a decade or more. And unfortunately, we were the first laboratory to do it, so we got scrutinized. And to this day, Cyrex, even though I'm no longer there, I know that they get scrutinized heavily for thinking outside the box and doing these advanced tests. And at the time, my focus was educating the practitioners on how to interpret these tests and how to use them in the practice. And the practitioners kept saying, Jama, we need patient literature. And I always had it on my to-do list. It was always there. I mean, I had it in capital letters. It was on my, in my paper to-do list and on my whiteboard. It was always there. But I was so focused on educating the practitioners and providing them with all of the tools they needed. The patient literature just never came to fruition. But as fate would have it, in late 2018, I survived a traumatic brain injury. And after that, I was no longer able to work full time. So but I'm too young to collect Social Security. So what do I do? And so I decided, well, I can sell my property in Los Angeles, which was almost paid off and doubled in value since I bought it. So I'd have a nice fat nest egg. And then move to sunny, beautiful Puerto Vallarta, where cost of living is much cheaper than Los Angeles. So that's why I'm here. And you had mentioned in the introduction about how the internet, there's great information and there's a lot of misinformation. And my husband, whom I met in the process of looking for property to buy in Puerto Vallarta, he loves to cook. And he keeps saying, Jama, find me some recipes that I can cook for you. And so I joined these gluten-free Facebook groups. And I was just appalled by all of the misinformation that kept being regurgitated over and over and over that people believed were fact because it kept being told and retold by bloggers and influencers and, all of those people. So I decided to write the Gluten 101 books. And so, because I would get on these groups and I would try to discuss immunology and the research, mm-hmm. and I would post the research articles, and even doctors would criticize me and try to crucify me for saying I was wrong. And I'm like, well, maybe you should go back to your immunology books. But that's why I wrote the books. I finally had time. It took a traumatic brain injury to give me the time to write patient literature. And I started with gluten. And I have I wrote 2 books so far, and I've got a series in mind. So there will be more to come.
Oh, so it's so great, right? Because, and listen, I think TikTok and Instagram have their place because it starts the conversation, but I also do worry, right, about misinformation because there is so much. And even though there's some great people doing some great work, there's a lot of people spewing out information that really just gets us confused. So let's go to Gluten 101. Okay, the whole book in 3 minutes. You ready? I need high level. I know, impossible to do, but let's try anyway. So high level Gluten 101. Give everybody out there a couple what do we need to know, right? Where do we start with gluten?
Okay. Well, I wrote 2 of them so far. So the Gluten 101 Survival Guide is for the newbie. That is the one that your doctor just told you got to give up gluten. Your test came back, you're positive, you have to give up gluten. And, have a nice day. Okay, but you're in shock. You're like, oh my God, what do I do now? My social life is over. All of that. hopefully the doctor will hand you this book and send you out the door. If not, go to Amazon and buy it. And the survival guide tells you how to prep your home, how to shop, how to manage going out to eat, how to manage going to parties, how to manage travel. And it's all, laid out for you. These are the words that you need to watch for if you're reading an ingredients list. But I stress this throughout the book, throughout the survival guide book. Do not do the gluten-free substitute thing. You had mentioned, it used to taste like cardboard. Now, some of it tastes really good, and I'm not a purist. I do occasionally go have my there's a bakery. Oh, it's actually a restaurant bakery. I've never eaten there. I just go for the sweets. But they make these donuts that are made from almond and chickpea flour. And they taste so good. And then they put peanut butter on it and chocolate chips on the top. And they're all dairy-free, gluten-free, and just heaven. So I do that once in a while. It's very good. It doesn't taste like cardboard. But it's not filled with good things. So if you are doing the gluten-free substitute route, which I get because you don't have to change what you've been eating, you just substitute gluten-free versions of what you were eating. But remember, what you were eating, all this ultra-processed foods, was what was destroying your gut in the first place and causing this gluten reactivity, whether it's celiac disease or non-celiac gluten sensitivity or gluten intolerance or wheat. I mean, there are non-gluten proteins in wheat that cause the same inflammation and the same villi damage that gluten does. So it's not just about removing gluten. You also have to remove wheat. And unfortunately, doctors don't explain that. And in the U.S., there are so many gluten-free products that are made with deglutened wheat ingredients. So it's still not healthy for people. And most people who are gluten reactive, including most people with celiac disease, also react to these non-gluten wheat proteins. They just don't know it because they weren't tested properly. So yes, you can do that gluten-free substitute route, but it's not going to heal your gut. It's not going to solve your problem. So I stress focus on foods that are naturally gluten-free. Shop the perimeter. As you know, every healthcare practitioner in functional medicine shop the perimeter of the grocery store, except for the deli. Forget the deli, but you want fresh meat, you want fresh produce. You just don't want processed deli meats. Anything that's processed, you should stay away from, especially for that first 6 months to a year. And after you had time to calm the inflammation and heal the gut and eat whole foods and lose your mouth feel, and that is a real thing. You get addicted, not only if you have the opioid problem, but there is opioid in wheat that causes you to be addicted to it. There's a mouthfeel that we all have, and it takes about 6 months to get rid of that. And I can attest to it, and I talk about it in my Gluten 101, what you need to know about celiac disease and non-celiac gluten sensitivity. I talk about it in that book. But in the newbie book, I call it my newbie book, the survival guide, that one is, that's the one you want right out of the gate. Now, the Gluten 101, the advanced book, I call it the advanced book. I had it immunology in there in the title, but I think that scares people. So I took immunology out before publishing. And now it is Gluten 101, everything you need to know about celiac disease and non-celiac gluten sensitivity. So this one tells you all about why wheat and gluten are bad for you, how it's harming you. It's not just the gut, it's harming your brain, it's inflaming your joints, it's causing, triggering autoimmunity or exasperating it. It can trigger cancers because of that chronic inflammation. And if you're one who has chronic constipation, you could end up with colon cancer. So there's a lot to the immunology aspect of gluten and wheat that people are not discussing, and patients really need to know. I think that if you know how it's damaging you, you will be more committed to the gluten-free lifestyle. And I say lifestyle, not diet, lifestyle. You'll be healthier and have a much better quality of life if you are committed to it. And for some people to commit to it, they need to understand exactly how it's damaging their body so that they can make the choice to, when you're in a social situation, that don't be pressured into eating the pizza when you know it's going to hurt you, kind of thing.
Yeah, you said something very interesting, especially with the title of the book. It's not just celiac, but it's non-celiac. So, are we looking at how gluten really affects everybody? Or is it just down the path of those people that have already been diagnosed with the autoimmune disease? Because, Jama, you and I both know that you don't just wake up with disease one day, you work on it over time. And, it's something that is very destructive and manifests. And, if you're lucky enough to get the official diagnosis, right, so that you know what you're dealing with. But really, are we looking at, as a population staying away, whether there's a diagnosis or not?
That is a hotly debated topic on these forums on Facebook about, well, celiac disease, you have to be strictly gluten-free. If you're just sensitive or just have intolerance, you can cheat. You don't have to worry about cross-contamination. And there's all of this misinformation that drives me up the wall. But in reality, if you have non-celiac gluten sensitivity, the gluten isn't damaging your intestinal villi. Instead, it is damaging your brain, and eventually you'll end up with Alzheimer's or dementia. It could be damaging your heart, and you could develop cardiovascular disease. It could be damaging your thyroid. Are you having problems with losing weight? Do you have thyroid Hashimoto's? And giving up gluten in patients with Hashimoto's has been shown to drastically improve the Hashimoto's. So it isn't just about that. Saving your brain is just as important as saving your intestinal villi. For the people who have gluten intolerance. Now, there's a difference between gluten intolerance and gluten sensitivity. I know it gets used interchangeably, but they are not the same thing. Gluten sensitivity involves the immune system. You make antibodies against gluten when you have gluten sensitivity. You can test for it. If you make antibodies but you don't have celiac disease, you have non-celiac gluten sensitivity. Gluten intolerance is a lack of the digestive enzymes that break down gluten, and mainly the dipeptidyl peptidase, the DPP4 enzyme is the one that has been shown to break down both gluten and dairy. Now, for people with gluten intolerance, the true gluten intolerance, where they're not making antibodies, using the gluten digestive enzymes can help them if they want to have a cheat day, but it isn't recommended because those enzymes can't break up a whole bunch of gluten. It can break up cross-contamination, a little bit of gluten, but not a whole plate full of spaghetti. And just keep in mind that when you have gluten intolerance, you have inflammation. And inflammation in the gut causes a breakdown of the gut. When you have a breakdown of the gut, you're at risk for autoimmunity throughout your body. And it can also cause cancer in the gut. So preventing cancer in the gut is just as important as protecting your intestinal villi. So there is no, I just have gluten sensitivity, or I just have gluten sensitivity or gluten intolerance. When you think that celiac disease is the only one that is the serious diagnosis, they're all serious, equally serious.
They are. So what are some of the common foods that cross-react with gluten that people might not be thinking about? So I didn't eat bread. I didn't have my pancakes this morning, but what else am I putting in my mouth that really could be a problem for those of us, and you talk about testing and it's important, but in the meantime, until we get the test, where do we think some of those issues are?
Well, the common ones that were found through the study that Vojdani and Tarash had published is, of course, dairy. And in my own study, where I looked at the commonality of dairy reactivity in people with gluten reactivity, it was average 50%, and I was looking at the different the gliadin proteins versus the non-gluten proteins. And so depending on and whether you have celiac disease or non-celiac gluten sensitivity, it all averaged out to be 50% of gluten reactive people also react to dairy. So dairy is the big one. Other big ones are rice, corn, oats. Oats is a difficult one because a lot of people rely on gluten-free oats, which there's a heavy price you pay for gluten-free oats, and there's a reason why. I mean, I grew up in North Dakota, the wheat-producing capital of the U.S., and I know that the shared facilities, the storage facilities, because the grain gets put in a silo. And then when the silo is full, then this train car comes along and they fill up the train car they empty out the silo into the train car, and then the train goes off. So it's the same train car could be used for wheat, oats, soybeans, corn, and the same silo, same thing. It could be used for wheat, corn, so they're not dedicated to one grain. So this is where the big problem is in getting gluten-free oats. But oats, there are varieties, cultivars of oats that naturally cross-react with gluten. So you could be consuming a gluten-free oat, one that had the dedicated silo, the dedicated processing plant, the dedicated rail car. All of that was dedicated to these particular oats. But if they're of that cultivar that cross-reacts with gluten, you're still going to feel like you got glutened, even though you're eating gluten-free oats.
I like the way you say that, Jama. You got glutened. I think we need a T-shirt that says "I got glutened today."
I'm making T-shirts for Gluten 101, thriving without gluten. Because you can. That's my big message. You can thrive without gluten. And I know it's really hard to understand that when you're first diagnosed. But trust me, if you do the non-substitute route, you can travel the world. You know that as soon as you land, you can go. There are grocery stores in South Africa. There are grocery stores in Italy. So you may not feel comfortable eating out, even though you can. There are cuisines that are predominantly gluten-free. It's very safe to eat at authentic Mexican restaurants, authentic Indian restaurants, authentic Thai restaurants. They use very little wheat, if any, in those cuisines. And I'm saying authentic. It has to be authentic, not your, you know what I mean. You can't go to a fast food restaurant and expect to have gluten-free. But
I'm not sure we should be going there anyway. But I do have an interesting question for you, because there's lots of people, myself included, who have traveled to Italy who are like, oh my gosh, I sat down, I ate the bread, I ate the big bowl of pasta. Is it really true that we can go to some other countries and eat some of those products, if you will, have the big bowl of spaghetti and not be as affected in that country versus, let's say, here in the United States?
Again, a hotly debated topic. And I did a lot of research in that area because I too had tried that. I ate gluten on one of my trips. When I went to Malaga, I had a pastry. And I didn't have my normal gluten reaction, but I was doing other things. So I don't know because I was taking care of myself and I had my supplements, my enzymes and stuff, that might have taken care of it. But one of the things that, and it was a study, a really good study out of Italy. Italy, I believe. No, maybe it was Germany. Sorry. Out of Europe, we'll say. A study done in Europe.
That was a good cover. We'll take Europe. Okay.
A study done in Europe. And what they found was that you could have the same, we'll just use durum wheat as an example. Durum wheat is the most common wheat grown in the U.S. for human consumption. If you grow durum wheat in Germany, and the same durum wheat in Italy, there's going to be differences in the proteins. They're both durum wheat, but there's going to be differences. It's just slight, not that big noticeable of differences, but when they break down the protein structures, they have different ratios of the proteins. So some could be higher in alpha-gliadin, 33, and the other one could be higher in glutenin. Both are gluten proteins, but it's a different ratio. And not everyone reacts to the same gluten protein. There are multiple gluten proteins. The problem with the testing in mainstream medicine is they're only testing for one of the gluten proteins, but there are several that have been shown to be antigenic to humans. And the Cyrix test does test for multiple ones. So what they found, that makes sense, okay, from one country to another country because it's completely different soil, completely different climates. Mm-hmm. But they also found that if you planted durum wheat in this one particular field in Germany, and you planted the same durum wheat in a field 10 miles away, that too had slightly different proteins. So I suspect that some people don't feel like they got glutened because the ratio of gluten, the one gluten protein that they react to, if they only react to one of them, is smaller in the particular wheat that they were eating on that particular trip. Mm-hmm. So they may not have felt it. I suspect that's what's happening in some people. Other people can't do it. Other people do have problems. But people in Italy say that they can come to the U.S. and eat U.S. wheat and not have an issue, but they can't eat the wheat in Italy. So maybe it has something to do with your vacation. You're relaxed, you're not stressed out, and you're just feeling good. All that alcohol you're consuming, that might play a role.
Maybe you just didn't notice. Or do you think there is some legitimacy, because there's conversation this way too, right, about, and I'll call it abuse, if you will, right, or overconsumption, that you can establish antibodies or sensitivities over time when you overconsume a certain product as well, right? So
yes,
what do you believe about that validity of, we should rotate our foods, we should eat them less often, but yet we should still eat them. So there's some, there is some introduction. So I guess there's a lot of debate out there, right, and confusion as to, do we just not eat certain things forever, no matter what? Or is it that rotational type diet where, we talk about consuming something about every 4 days to not overload the system? Like, what, right? Like, I mean, listen, I'm a practitioner who's been doing this for 25 years, and sometimes I'm still confused, right? Because no matter what we teach people, sometimes the response is not what we expect. And then we've got to backtrack and go, oh, maybe we got it wrong.
Well, not every patient's the same. Some of them are more challenging than others, as you know.
Oh, it would be so much easier if they were identical, Jama. My job would just be a piece of cake.
Well, then they wouldn't need doctors. You would just need one doctor.
And we're good, they wouldn't need us either. Right, yeah. Right. But I'd still love your take on, so where do we go with that? How important is it to rotate foods but still introduce them?
I think it's very important to rotate foods because, as you know, the diverse microbiome is your friend. The more diverse foods that you eat fueling your microbiome, the more diverse your microbiome is. If you're only eating the same 11 foods every single week, you go to the grocery store, you buy the same 11 foods all the time, and that's what you eat all week long, you're not going to have a very diverse microbiome. And that is, in the long run, the worst thing you can do for your health. You need to eat a variety of foods. And, if you have to do that regimented rotation diet, whether you don't eat the same thing within a 4-day period, there are people that have to do that because they are so messed up and they have to remain on a rotation diet for a very long time. I try to throw in something different every now and then into my diet. I don't know if this is really answering your question, but I do agree with the rotation diet for some people. Other people, they tend to naturally eat a diverse diet, maybe the same 50 foods instead of the same 11 foods. But they're diversifying it, which is causing a much healthier microbiome.
So it makes me think about what we do in the environment with children, right? And it's chicken nuggets and French fries, or it's hot dogs and French fries, or it's burgers and French. I don't know why I'm picking on the French fry, but I'm going to pick on the French fry. And I wonder, it just seems to go with everything, for kids' meals, right? There's always this and a French fry. How much damage do you think we're actually doing for the years of what the kids are eating, right? Like so for example, I have 3 kids, right? We never ordered off the kids menu and we eat out all the time. Like my kids ate from the adult menu, right? It wasn't macaroni and cheese and chicken nuggets, although I kept a dairy-free, gluten-free home. So it's hard to dig through the kids menu that way. But even for those people that don't do it, I wonder how much damage we're doing because, to your point, it's the same foods that those kids are eating. And if that microbiome is so messed up in our childhood, how are we set for success as an adult? After, decades on this planet and more susceptible to disease anyway, the longer we're here.
Right. You are spot on that it takes years. You don't just one day wake up and have gluten reactivity, or you don't just wake up one day and have rheumatoid arthritis. It is years, decades of damage, and it starts with your food. It starts with that food that you're consuming, anything you're putting in your mouth, and it doesn't just necessarily have to be food. It could be medications. It could be, drugs, non-medicinal drugs. It could be a variety of chemicals attached to your food. And when you're talking about kids' foods, it is full of chemicals, and it is, like the kids menu, like you said, the mac and cheese and hot dogs and all these French fries, things that you should not include in a healthy diet for a happy microbiome. So I totally agree that feeding your children these kinds of food in the long run, when they become adults, they're going to be 3 steps behind those whose parents had, like you, had fed their children proper food, real food, all those developing years. And if they don't get out of that, just look at before they even become adults, look at the rise in childhood diabetes and other childhood disorders, a lot of neurological disorders, not just autism being on the rise, but other neurological disorders on the rise. And what if we could just feed children real food, and maybe that would prevent a lot of these childhood disorders, and then they can transition into a healthy adult rather than transitioning from a sick child into a sick adult, and then in their 30s and 40s try to get healthy because their quality of life has gone downhill and they can't work full time anymore. So that's a topic for another day. I mean, we could talk forever on that.
We can. And before we can't anymore today, I do want to go down one just little other tiny path. And it's a place people might not be thinking about right now because we've been talking about what we ingest. But what about what we're exposed to topically, right? So I think even back down to the kids, it was really fun to draw in the bathtub with all of this colored, right, shampoo, soap stuff, whatever it is, and the bath bombs. And then we get into all these fancy lotions that smell good that, quite frankly, might even have glutinous products in that. And, how dangerous now, too, is it just the stuff that topically we're exposed to and not just ingesting?
And again, another hotly debated topic in the gluten world, because the celiac disease specialists claim that it doesn't matter what you put on your skin. As long as you're not ingesting it, it's safe. So go ahead and use your wheat-filled shampoo and your wheat-filled creams and everything else that has wheat in it. So what they're forgetting is that when you have a cut, I'm just going to start with this one. If you have a cut an open sore in your scalp, or a fresh bug bite on your arm, or if you have bleeding gums and you're using a toothpaste that has wheat in it, that is an open highway to the bloodstream where your antibodies are, which are then going to recognize the gluten, which is then going to attack the intestinal villi because that's your weak point. So if you have celiac disease, if you have non-celiac gluten sensitivity and your weak point is your brain, it's going to attack your brain, and so on. So that's just one avenue. Now, we also, the intestinal barrier has proteins in it called transglutaminase. Transglutaminase 2 is the predominant one in the intestine. And it also has a protein structure, a zonula protein structure, that is between the individual cells. It kind of holds the individual cells together, sticks them all together so that they can have this great big field of skin. So your intestinal barrier is made up of the transglutaminase inside the cell and the zonula between the cells. The skin barrier, your outside barrier, your dermis, has transglutaminase number 3. It's the same kind of structure, does the same thing as transglutaminase number 2. It's just transglutaminase number 3 in your skin. So it's slightly different structure, but it does the same thing as transglutaminase 2. And you also have zonula in your dermis. So one of the things that they know from celiac research is that gluten signals zonulin, a signaling protein that opens up the zonula, the tight junctions, and opens up the space between your epithelial cells and your intestinal barrier. So if you eat gluten and the zonulin tells the tight junctions to open up, then all of this garbage that you just ate, the food coloring, the nitrates and fatty foods, anything that you just ate can just undigested can get into your bloodstream and cause havoc. Now, you have the zonula and you have the transglutaminase in your transglutaminase 3 in your skin. So if you put a cream, a lotion that has wheat in it on your skin, the wheat has gluten in it. The gluten is going to signal the zonulin to open up the zonula on your skin, and it's going to open up the spaces so that larger gluten proteins can now enter into through the dermis into the bloodstream. So I try to talk about this on the forums, and of course the doctors all, say I'm nuts, but there are people with celiac disease who have reported back that when they bathe their baby in the baby soap that has wheat in it, they had a celiac flare. Okay. They weren't ingesting it. They weren't drinking down the tub of bath water when the baby was done. They were just had their hands in it, maybe up to their elbows, but that was enough to cause a gut reaction. So do you trust the experts, or do you trust the patients that are actually living it?
Yeah, well, Jama, if you're nuts, then I'm nuts, because I've bought in, and I think that's why it was really important today to bring this attention, because the literature is important, right? The science is important, but when a patient comes back and says, I did this and got that, it's time for us to start to listen and pay attention.
Yes,
because we also know a lot of times the science lags. And it's really important to take those things into consideration in order to best treat the patient. So I love that we were able to bring a little light to gluten today together. And I'm sure I'm going to have you back, because yes, I agree. This is about a 42-hour conversation and a rabbit hole we could go down to educate a lot of people. But we're going to have to cut it a little short today to do something fun. So I hope you'll stick around. We're going to take a quick break to listen to a couple sponsors, and then we're going to do some rapid fire questions just to see what your answers are that may or may not be related to what we were talking about today. You in for that, Jama?
Okay, let's go for it.
All right, everybody hang tight. Go refresh that bottle of water that comes in stainless steel, right? Not your plastic. And make sure you grab a seat. We are going to have some fun with some questions. We will be right back with the Positively Altered Podcast. This is your weekly dose of Dr. Cindy, the Positively Altered Podcast. Stop, hit that follow button now and spread the love with Positively Altered. Welcome back to one of my favorite parts of the podcast, the rapid fire questions, which are never rapid because I always have questions to the answers of the questions. And let's see what we've got, Jama, today. You ready?
Okay, go for it.
Okay, here we go. Let's just go right in. If you were the ruler of the universe, who would you trust to drive your chariot?
Oh, I don't know. Who would I trust? Definitely not my husband.
Is he not, like, does he get lost or is he not a good driver?
Oh, he crashes.
Why not?
Anything with wheels, he crashes. So no, not him.
All right. We don't want to ruin the chariot because you're the ruler of the universe. It's a pretty important vehicle. Well, my kids would say I'm a bad driver, but if you can't find anybody, I like hanging out with you.
Okay,
so
cool. I'll hire
volunteer
you.
myself. Okay, I'm in. All right. I will be the driver of the chariot. You know how we always have to change our passwords once in a while? If you had to change your name, what would you change your name to?
I used to want to change my name, but I don't want to change my name. I love my name. It's the female version of James, and there are lots of Jameses in my family on my dad's side of the family. My father was Jimmy, my grandfather James. I have a cousin James. I have lots of great grandfathers James. And James means protected by God, so Jama means protected by Goddess. I own it. I love it.
Well, it's a good thing you don't have to do that in order to get into your bank account because, you know, if it was a password, you'd be locked out. But I'll accept that as an answer. All right. If all animals could be domesticated, what animal would you pick to be your household pet?
Oh, I would pick an otter.
An otter? I think we've had an otter before. I can't remember, but I think that's actually been said. What do you love about otters?
They are so dang cute. I just love watching them. They're just so chill. But when they got a rock on their chest and they're pounding that clam to get it open, they're ferocious. When they're hungry, they get hangry like humans do. I think they're cute.
An otter it is. All right. What food should be considered a breakfast food that isn't?
Oh, broccoli.
Yes?
Yeah,
steamed,
broccoli.
grilled, raw? Does it matter?
It doesn't matter. It matters to me because I won't eat it raw. But steamed broccoli, I think it's a great way to start your day.
What if it gives you gas?
Then work from home.
Okay. But still start your day with it. It's okay. Just, again, clarifying questions to my rapid fire. That's not rapid fire. All right. Second to last question. What is your favorite body part and why?
My eyes. And because I love seeing the beauty of the world, the nature. I love to travel and just see new places and my eyes.
All right, I'm adding a question then that wasn't part of my question. Where do you still need to go see that you haven't yet?
Oh, there's so many places. I still haven't been to Thailand. And you and I had talked about that.
We did.
We did. We talked about going out on the beach in Thailand and writing your book, and I mentioned your book in my book. I did.
You did?
I did because I wrote a section about how you don't have to do what the doctor tells you to. So I was kind of encouraging people that if you're already gluten-free and it's working, stay the course. Don't reintroduce gluten in order to get the biopsy endoscopy thing done. Because you don't always have to do what the doctor tells you to. And in your book, you talked about, the doctors thought you were on those medications when you were going through chemo, and you weren't. You didn't take them, and you didn't tell the doctors that you didn't take them, but instead you were using natural supplements to get you through it. But they thought you were the poster child for the drugs. But no harm, no foul. They didn't know. They know now, I'm sure, after reading your book. But
sometimes secrets are okay to have, right? Sometimes. Yeah. Sometimes. No, I love it. All right. And lastly, what was your favorite thing about doing the podcast today?
What was my favorite what?
Thing about doing the podcast today?
Oh, just seeing you, Cindy. I miss you. We used to hang out so much more often.
I know, but you moved out of the country. How am I supposed to get to you easily?
Well, I said we have a guest room. There are daily flights in and out of our airport.
Okay, that's fair. I'll assume part of the responsibility for that. Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Well, Jama, I have to tell you, one of my favorite things about doing the podcast is always connecting with you because I miss our conversations. They've always been great. And what I love is what you bring to the table is opening up the door about some of the discrepancies that are out there, but always having some of the science to back up what you say, which I think is really important. So thank you
for
doing that. My gosh. How do our listeners find you? How do they get the book? How do they follow you on social media? How do they, find the guest? Don't give your address. We don't want people showing up at the guest house unless you've invited them. But everything else, how do they find you?
Well, the books are available on Amazon and Ingram Spark. But Amazon, I think, is a lot easier for people to order from them. And social media-wise, I am on Facebook as Jama Lambert, author. Don't do Jama Lambert because that's my personal page, and I never mix business with personal. And I also have a Gluten 101, Thriving Without Gluten Facebook group where we celebrate being gluten, thriving without gluten. We talk about the science there, so it's a great group to get involved in. And I am on Instagram as well as Jama.Lambert, author, I think. I don't know. I hate social media. I really, really, writers tend to be introverts, but you have to be extroverted, if you want to be on social media. I'm not.
That's all right. We will make sure in the show notes, you know how to get a hold of Jama. And if you join the Gluten 101 group on Facebook, please say hi to both of us because I'm in the group and I'd love to hear from everybody. If you want to learn more about what's going on in my world, please check out drcindyspeaks.com. And if you want to just shoot us an email, we'd love to hear from you at hello@drcindyspeaks. Find us either way. And if you like the podcast, you learned something today, or you just enjoyed hearing us chat, please make sure you like and follow us so you can hear future ones, and send a link to your friends so they can check it out. Jama, it was an absolute pleasure. I love having you, and I'm sure we're going to invite you back. Keep that sunshine. Will you just push a little bit east for us? Just kind of shove it down down our way here. Thank you. Yeah, a light breeze, a little sunshine. Throw some sand in a bottle, ship it off to me. We need some of that here in the Midwest. Anyway, everybody, I hope you have a great day and that this podcast has left you positively altered.